Brown Girl Dreaming Part 2.
The stories of South Carolina run like rivers. Our names.
In South Carolina,
We become the grandchildren. Gunner's 3 little ones. Sister Irby's grands. Mary Ann's babies. And when we are called by our names, my grandmother makes them all one. Hope Del Jackie. But my grandfather takes his sweet time saying each as if he has all day long. Or a whole lifetime.
Ohio behind us.
When we ask our mother how long we'll be here, sometimes she says for a while, and sometimes she tells us not to ask anymore, because she doesn't know how long we'll stay in the house where she grew up on the land she's always known. When we ask, she tells us this is where she used to belong, but her sister Caroline, our Aunt Kay, has moved to the north. Her brother Odell is dead now, and her baby brother Robert say he's almost saved enough money to follow Caroline to New York City.
Maybe I should go there too, my mother says. Everyone else,
She says, has a new place to be now.
Everyone else
has gone away. And now coming back home isn't really coming back home at all.
The garden.
Each spring, the dark Nickeltown dirt is filled with the promise of what the earth gave back to you if you work the land, plant the seeds, and pull the weeds.
My southern grandfather
missed slavery by 1 generation. His grandfather had been owned. His father worked the land from dawn till dusk for the promise of cotton and a little pay. So this is what he believes in your hands in the cool dirt until the earth gives back to you all that you've asked of it. Sweet
peas and collards,
green peppers and cukes, lettuce and melon, berries and peaches, and one day, when I'm able, my grandfather says, I'm going to figure out how to grow myself a pecan tree. God gives you what you need, my grandmother says, but not to ask for more than that. My grandfather says, and goes back to work in the land, pulling from it all we need, and more than that.
Gunner's children.
At dusk, just as the fireflies flicker on, my grandfather makes his way home. We see him coming slow down the road, his silver lunchbox bouncing soft against his leg. Now, as he gets closer, we hear him singing, where will the wedding supper be? Way down yonder in a hollow tree.
Good evening, Miss Clara.
Evening, Miss May. How's that leg, Miss Belle? What you cooking, Auntie Charlotte? You thinking of making me something to eat? His voice ringing down Hall Street, circling round the roads of Nickeltown, and maybe out into the big, wide world. Maybe all the way up in New York. Aunt Kay's hearing it and thinking about coming home. Then he's close enough to run to, and the 3 of us climbing him like a tree until he laughs out loud. We call him Daddy. That is what our mother calls him, and that is all we know now. Our daddy seems taller than everyone else in all of Greenville. More handsome, too. His square jaw and light brown eyes, so different from our own narrow-faced, dark-eyed selves. Still, his hand is warm and strong around my own as I skip beside him, the wind blowing up around us. He says, y'all are Gunner's children. Just keep remembering that. Just keep remembering. This is the way of Nickeltown evenings. Daddy coming home, me jumping into his arms, the others circling around him, all of us grinning, all of us talking, all of us loving him up.
At the end of the day.
There are white men working at the printing press beside Daddy, their fingers blackened with ink so that at the end of the day, palms up, it's hard to tell who is white and who is not. Still, they call my grandfather Gunner, even though he's a foreman and is supposed to be called Mr. Irby. But he looks the white men in the eye, sees the way so many of them can't understand a colored man telling them what they need to do. This is new, too fast for them. The South is changing. Sometimes they don't listen. Sometimes they walk away. At the end of the day, the newspaper is printed, the machines are shut down, and each man punches a clock and leaves. But only colored folks come home to Nickeltown.
Here you can't look right
or left or up or down without seeing brown people. Colored town, brown town, even a few mean words to say where we live.
My grandmother tells us
It's the way of the South. Colored folks used to say where they were told that they belonged. But times are changing, and people are itching to go where they want. This evening, though, I'm happy to belong to Nickeltown.
day work. There is day work for colored women.
In the mornings, their dark bodies fill the cross-town buses, taking them away from Nickeltown to the other side of Greenville, where the white people live. Our grandmother tells us this as she sets a small hat with a topaz pin on her head, pulls white gloves over her soft brown hands. 2 days a week she joins the women, taking on this second job now. There are 4 more mouths to feed, and the money she gets from part-time teaching isn't enough anymore. I'm not ashamed, she says. Cleaning is what I know. I'm not ashamed if it feeds my children. When she returns in the evening, her hands are ashen from washing other people's clothes, most often by hand. Her ankles swollen from standing all day, making beds, sweeping floors, shaking dust from curtains, picking up after other people's children, cooking. The list goes on and on. Don't any of you ever do day work, she warns us. I'm doing it now so you don't have to. And maybe all across Nickeltown, other children are also hearing this.
Get the Epsom salts,
She says, leaning back into the soft brown chair, her eyes closing. When she isn't in it, Hope, Dell, and I squeeze in side by side, and still there is space left for one more. We fill a dishpan with warm water, pour the salts in, swirl it around, and carefully carry it to her feet.
We fight to see who will get to rub the swelling
From grandmother's ankles, the smile back on her face, the stories back into the too quiet room. You could have
eaten off the floor by the time
I left this one house today. My grandmother begins, letting out a heavy sigh. But let me tell you, when I first got there, you would have thought the devil himself had come through.
lullaby. At night, every living thing competes for a chance to be heard. The crickets and the frogs call out.
Sometimes there's the soft woo-woo of an owl lost amid the pines. Even the dogs won't rest until they've howled at the moon. But the crickets always win, long after the frogs stop croaking and the owl has found its way home. Long after the dogs have lain down, losing the battle against sleep, the crickets keep going as though they know their song is our lullaby.
Bible times. My grandmother keeps her Bible
On a shelf beside her bed. When the day is over, she reads quietly to herself, and in the morning she tells us the stories, how Noah listened to God's word, pulled 2 of each animal inside the ark, waited for the rains to come, and floated safely as the
sinners drown.
It's morning now, and we've floated safely through Nickeltown night. Our evening prayers, Jehovah, please give us another day, now answered. Biscuits, warm and buttered, stop halfway to our mouths. How much rain did it take to destroy the sinners? What lies did they tell to die such a death? How loud was the rain when it came? How did no one know that the cobra wouldn't bite, the bull wouldn't charge, the bee wouldn't sting?
Our questions come fast.
But we want the stories more than we want the answers, so when my grandmother says, hush, so I can tell it, we do. Jacob's dream of a ladder to heaven, and Jesus with the children surrounding him. Moses on the mountain, fire burning words into stone. Even Salome intrigues us, her wish for a man's head on a platter, who would want this and live to tell the story of that wanting. Autumn is coming. Outside there's a sound of wind through the pine trees, but inside there are stories. There are biscuits and grits and eggs, the fire in the pot-bellied stove already filling the house with warmth. Still, we shiver at the thought of evil Salome, chew our biscuits slowly. We're safe here, miles and years away from Bible times.
The reader. When we can't find my
Sister, we know she's under the kitchen table, a book in her hand, a glass of milk, and a small bowl of peanuts beside her. We know we can call Odella's name out loud, slap the table hard with our hands, dance around it singing, she'll be coming round the mountain, so many times that song makes us sick and the circling makes us dizzy. And still, my sister will do nothing more than slowly turn the page.
the beginning. I cannot write a word yet.
But at 3, I now know the letter J. Love the way it curves into a hook that I carefully top with that straight hat the way my sister has taught me to do.
Love the sound of the letter and
The promise that one day this will be connected to
a full name, my own, and I will be able to write it
by myself.
without my sister's hand over.
Over mine, making it do what I cannot yet do.
How amazing these words are that
Slowly come to me.
how wonderfully
On and on they go. Will the words end? I ask whenever I remember to.
Nope, my sister says, all of 5 years old now.
Now, and promising me infinity.
Hope. The South doesn't agree with
My brother.
the heat sandpapers his skin. Don't scratch, my grandmother warns.
But he does, and the skin grows raw beneath his fingers. The pollen leaves him puffy-eyed. His small breaths come quick, have too much around them.
Have too much sound around them.
He moves slow, sickly now, where once he was strong. And when his body isn't betraying him, Ohio does. The memories waking him in the night, the view
From my father's shoulders.
the wonder of the Nelsonville house, the air so easy to breathe.
You can keep your South, my father.
Father had said,
And now Hope stays
mostly quiet, unless asked to speak, his head bent inside the superhero comic books my grandfather brings home on Fridays. Hope searches for himself inside their pages.
leaves them dog-eared.
By Monday morning,
The South, his mortal enemy.
the South,
His kryptonite. The almost friends. There's the boy from up the road
with a hole in his heart. Some afternoons he comes to sit in our yard and listen to our stories. Our Aunt Kay, we tell him, lives in New York City, and maybe we
We will too someday. And yes, it's true.
once we lived in Ohio. That's why we speak the way we do.
We don't ask about the hole in his heart.
Heart. Our grandmother warns us we know better than that. There's
Cora and her sisters.
across the road. One word in my grandmother's mouth, you stay away from Cora and her sisters. Their mother left the family, ran off with the church pastor. Cora and her sisters sometimes sit watching us.
We watch them back.
Not asking what it feels like to have a mother, because our grandmother warns us we know better than that.
There are 3 brothers
Who live down the road, and we know this because our grandmother tells us. They live inside their dark house all summer, coming out in the evening when their mother returns from work, long after we've bathed and slipped into
to our summer pajamas.
books curled into our arms.
These are our almost friends.
The people we think about when we're tired of playing with each other. But our grandmother says 3's plenty. 3's a team.
Find something to do together.
And so over and over again we do. Even though we want to ask her, why can't we play with them?
We don't. We know better than that. The right way to speak. The first time my brother says
Ain't. My mother pulls a branch from the willow tree growing down the hill at the edge of our backyard. As she slips her closed hand over it, removing the leaves, my brother
brother begins to cry because the branch is a switch now, no longer beautifully
weeping at the bottom of the hill. It whirs as my mother whips it through the air.
and down against my brother's leg.
Legs,
You will never,
my mother says, say ain't
in this house, you will never say
ain't anywhere. Each switching
is a warning to us.
Our words are to remain crisp and clear. We are never to say, huh, ain't, y'all, get, I'm gonna. Never ma'am, just yes, with meeting eyes enough to show respect.
Don't ever ma'am
Anyone, the word too painful a memory for my mother of not so long ago, southern subservient days.
The list of what not to say
Goes on and on. You are from the north, my mother says. You know the right way to speak.
as the switch raises.
Dark welts on my brother's legs. Dell and I look on, afraid to open our mouths, fearing the South will slip out into them. The Candy Lady. On Fridays, our grandfather takes us to the candy lady's house, even though our grandmother worries that he's going to be the cause of our teeth rotting right out of our heads. But my grandfather just laughs, making us open our mouths to show the strong, herby teeth we've inherited from his side of the family. The three of us stand there, our mouths wide open, strong white teeth inside, and my grandmother has to nod as to say, "They're lucky," before sending us on our way. The candy lady's small living room is filled with shelves and shelves of chocolate bars and gumdrops, Good and Plenty and jujubes, moon pies and Necco wafers, lollipops and long red licorice strings. So much candy that it's hard to choose until our grandfather says, "Get what you want, but I'm getting myself some ice cream." Then the candy lady, who's gray-haired and never smiles, disappears into another room and returns a few minutes later with a wafer cone, pale yellow, lemon chiffon, ice cream dripping from it. Outside, even this late in the afternoon, the sun is beating down, and the idea of lemon chiffon ice cream cooling us even for a few minutes makes us all start saying at once, "Me too, Daddy, me too, Daddy." The walk home from the candy lady's house is a quiet one, except for the sound of melting ice cream being slurped up fast before it slides past our wrists, on down our arms, onto the hot, dry road.
South Carolina at war. Because we have a right,
My grandfather tells us. We are sitting at his feet, and the story
tonight is
why people are marching all over the South. To walk and sit and dream wherever we want. First, they bought us here. Then we worked for free. Then it was 1863 and we were supposed to be free, but we weren't. And that's why people are so mad. And it's true.
we can't turn on the radio
Without hearing about the marching. We can't go downtown Greenville without seeing the teenagers walking into stores, sitting where brown people still ain't allowed to sit, and getting carried out, their bodies limp, their faces calm.
This is the way brown people
Have to fight, my grandfather says. You can't just put your fist up, you have to insist on something gently. Walk toward a thing slowly. But be ready
to die.
my grandfather says, for what's right.
Be ready to die, my grandfather says,
For everything.
thing you believe in. And none of us can imagine death.
But we try to imagine it anyway.
Even my mother joins the fight.
When she thinks our grandmother isn't watching, she sneaks out to meet her cousins downtown. But just as she's stepping through the door, her good dress and gloves on, my grandmother says, "Now don't go getting arrested."
And Mama sound like a little girl
When she says, "I won't."
More than 100 years, my grandfather says.
We're still fighting for the free life we're supposed to be living.
So there's a war in South Carolina. And even as we play and plant,
And preach and sleep,
we are a part of it. Because you're colored, my grandfather
says. And just as good,
and bright and beautiful and free as anybody. And nobody colored in the
the South is stopping, my grandfather says, until everybody knows what's true.
the training. When my mother's older cousin,
And best friend Dorothy comes with her children, they run off saying that they can't understand the way Hope, Dell, and I speak. "Y'all go too fast," they say, and the words are all pushed together. They say they don't feel like playing with us little kids, so they leave us to walk the streets of Nickeltown when we can't leave the porch.
we watch them go, hear Cousin Dorothy say,
Say, "Don't you knuckleheads get into trouble out there." And then we stay close to Cousin Dorothy, make believe we're not listening when she knows we are, laughing when she laughs, shaking our own head when she shakes her head.
you know how you've got to get
"In those trainings," she says, and our mother nods. "They won't let you sit at the counters without them.
have to know what to do.
When the people come at you."
She has a small space between her
Teeth, like my mother's space, and Hope's and Dell's too. She's
tall, dark-skinned, beautiful, broad-shouldered. She wears gloves and
colored dresses made for her by a seamstress in Charleston.
The trainings take place in the basements of churches and the back rooms
Of stores, on long car trips, and anywhere else where people can gather. They learn how to change the South without violence, how how to not be moved by the evil actions of others, how to walk slowly but with deliberate steps.
How to sit at counters and be cursed at without cursing back. Have food and drinks poured over them
Without standing and hurting someone. Even the teenagers get trained to sit tall, not cry, swallow back fear.
But Lord, Cousin Dorothy says,
Everybody has a line. When I'm walking up to that lunch counter taking my seat, I pray to God, don't let anybody spit on me. I can be
sweet Dorothy 7 days a week, 24 hours a day,
as long as nobody crosses that line. Because if they do,
this non-violent
movement is over.
The blanket. The first time my mother goes to New York
City, it's only for a long weekend visit.
Her kiss on our cheeks, as much promise as excitement in her eyes.
I'll bring something back for each of you.
It's Friday night and the
Weekend ahead is already calling us to the Candy Lady's house, my hand in Daddy's. He doesn't know how to say no, my grandmother complains. But neither does she. Dresses and socks and ribbons, our hair pressed and curled. She calls my sister and me her baby girls. Smiles proudly when the women say how pretty we are.
So for the first time my mother goes
To New York City, we don't know
to be sad. The weight of our grandparents'
love like a blanket,
with us beneath it, safe and warm. Miss Bell and the Marchers. They look like regular people
visiting our neighbor, Miss Bell. Foil-covered dishes held out in front of them as they arrive, some in pairs, some alone, some just like little kids
holding their mother's hands. If you didn't know, you'd think it was
just an evening gathering, maybe church people heading to Miss Bell's house to talk about God. But when Miss Bell pulls the blinds closed, the people fill their dinner plates with food, their glasses with sweet tea,
and gather to talk about the marching. Even though Miss Bell works for a white
lady who said, I will fire you in a minute if I ever see you on that line. Miss Bell knows that marching isn't the only thing she can do. Knows that people fighting need full bellies to think and safe places to gather. She knows the white lady isn't the only one who's watching, listening, waiting to end this fight. So she
keeps the marchers' glasses filled,
adds more cornbread and potato salad to their plates, stands in the kitchen ready to slice lemon pound cake into generous pieces.
And in the morning,
just before she pulls her uniform from the closet, she prays,
God, please give me and those people marching another day. Amen. How to listen number 2. In the stores downtown,
we're always followed around just because we're brown.
Hair night. Saturday night smells
of biscuits and burning hair. Supper done, and my grandmother has transformed the kitchen into a beauty shop. Laid across the table is the hot comb, Dixie peach hair grease, horsehair brush, parting stick, and one girl at a time. Jackie first, my sister says, our freshly washed hair damp and spiraling over toweled shoulders and pale cotton nightgowns. She opens her book to the marked page, curls up in a chair pulled close to the wood-burning
stove, bowl of peanuts in her
lap. The words in her books are so small, I have to squint to
see the letters. Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates, The House at Pooh Corner, Swiss Family Robinson.
Thick books, dog-eared, from the handing down from neighbor to neighbor. My sister
handles them gently, marks the pages with torn brown pieces of paper bag, and wipes her hands
before going beyond the hardbound covers.
Read to me, I say, my eyes and scalp
already stinging from the tug of the brush through my hair. And while my grandmother sets the hot comb on the flame, heats it just enough to pull my tight curls straighter,
my sister's voice wafts over the kitchen, past the smell of hair and oil and flame, settles like a hand
on my shoulder, holds me there.
I want silver skates like Hans's, a place on a desert island.
I've never seen the ocean,
but this too, I can imagine.
Blue water pouring over red dirt.
As my sister reads, the pictures begin forming, as though someone has turned on a television,
lowered the sound, pulled it up close.
Grainy, black and white pictures come slowly to me, deep, infinite, remembered. On a bright December morning long ago, my sister's clear, soft voice opens up to me. I lean in, so hungry for it. Hold still now, my grandmother warns. So I sit on my hands to keep my mind off hurting my head and my whole body still. But the rest of me is already leaving. The rest of me is already gone. Family names. There's James, Joseph, Andrew, Geneva, Annie Mae, William, Lucinda, David, Talmadge, my grandmother says. All together, my mama gave birth to 13 children. Our heads spin at the thought of that many brothers and sisters. 3 died as babies, she says, but only a little of the spinning stops. There's Lavania, Montague, Ellis, Halike, Valet May, Verdi, Alora on my daddy's side. We can't help but laugh each time our daddy tells us the names of his brothers and sisters. His own name, Gunner, sends us laughing all over again. Gave their kids names that no master could ever take away. What about Bob or Joe, Hope wants to know. What about John or Michael? Or something real normal like Hope. Hope is not normal, my sister says. Not for a boy. I think your name is a mistake. Maybe they meant to name you Verdi. I'm the great hope of the family, my brother says. Just like Grandpa Hope. Just like Hope the Dope, my sister says back. Keep on arguing, my grandfather says. I'll take you both down to City Hall. People be happy to call you Talmadge and Valley May. American Dream. Even when my girls were little, we'd go down there, my grandmother tells us, and people be marching. The marching didn't just start yesterday. People with those dogs scared everybody near to death. And just once, I let my girls march. My grandmother leans back in her brown chair, her feet still in the Epsom salts water, her fingers tapping out some silent tune. She closes her eyes. I let them and I prayed. What's the thing, I ask her, that would make people want to live together? People have to want it. That's all. We get quiet. Maybe all of us are thinking about the ones who want it and the ones who don't. We all have the same dream, my grandmother says, to live equal in a country that's supposed to be the land of the free. She lets out a long breath, deep remembering. When your mother was little, she wanted a dog, but I said no. Quick as you can blink, I told her a dog will turn on you. So my mother brought kittens home, soft and purring inside of empty boxes, mewing and mewing until grandmother fell in love and let her keep them. My grandmother tells each of us as we sit at her feet, each story like a photograph we can look right into and see our mother there, marchers and dogs and kittens all blending, and us now there in each moment beside her. The fabric store. Some Fridays we walk to downtown Greenville where there are some clothing stores, some restaurants, a motel, and the Five and Dime store, but my grandmother won't take us into any of these places anymore. Even the Five and Dime, which isn't segregated now, but where a woman is paid, my grandmother says, to follow colored people around in case they try to steal something. We don't go into restaurants because they always sit us near the kitchen. When we go downtown, we go to the fabric store where the white woman knows my grandmother from back in Anderson and asks, how's Gunner doing? And how your girls in New York? She rolls the fabric out for my grandmother to rub between her fingers. They discuss drape and nap and where to cinch the waist on a skirt for a child. At the fabric store, we're not colored or Negro. We're not thieves or shameful or something to be hidden away. At the fabric store, we're just people. Ghosts. In downtown Greenville, they painted over the white-only signs, except on the bathroom doors. They didn't use a lot of paint so that you could still see the words right there, like a ghost, standing in front, still keeping you out. The leavers. We watch men leave Greenville in their one good suit, shoes spit-shined. We watch women leave in their Sunday clothes, hatted and lipsticked and white-gloved. We watch them catch buses in the evening,
the black shadows of their backs, the last we see of them.
Others fill cars with bags. Whole families
Disappearing into the night, people waving goodbye.
They say the city is a place where diamonds speckle the sidewalk.
Money falls from the sky. They say a colored person can do well going there. All you need is fare out of Greenville.
All you need is to know somebody on the other side,
Waiting to cross you over.
like the River Jordan. Then you're in paradise. The beginning of leaving. When my mother returns from
New York, she has a new plan. All of us are going to move there.
we don't know any place else.
But Greenville now. New York is only the pictures she shows us in magazines and the two she has in her pocketbook of our Aunt Kay. In one, there are two other people standing with her. Bertie and Peaches, our mother tells us. We all used to be friends here in Nickeltown. That's all the young kids used to talk about, our grandmother tells us, going to New York City.
My mother smiles at us
And says, we'll be going to New York City. Just have to figure out some things first, that's all.
I don't know what I'd do without you.
You all to help, without you all up under me, my grandmother says, and there's a sadness in her voice. I don't know what I'd do, she says again.
Even sadder this time. As a child, I smelled the air. Mama takes her coffee out to the front
Porch, sips it slow. 2 steps down and her feet are covered in grass and dew.
New York doesn't smell like this, she says. I follow her.
The dew cool against my feet, the hush, soft hush of wind through leaves, my mother and I
Alone together. Her coffee is sweetened with condensed milk, her hair pulled back into a braid.
her dark fingers circling her cup. If I ask, she'll hold it to my lips. Let me taste the
Bittersweet of it. It's dawn and the birds have come alive.
chasing each other from maple to pine and back to maple again.
This is how time passes here.
The maple will
Be bare branched come winter, Mama says. But the pines, they just keep on living. And the air is what I'll remember.
even once we moved to New York,
It always smelled like this, my mother
mother says. Wet grass and pine.
like memory. Harvest time. When Daddy's garden is ready, it's
Filled with words that make me laugh when I say them. Pole beans and tomatoes,
okra and corn.
sweet peas and sugar snaps, lettuce and squash. Who could have imagined so much color that the ground disappears
And we are left walking through an autumn's worth of
crazy words that beneath the magic of my grandmother's hands become side dishes.
grown folks' stories. Warm autumn night with
The crickets crying, the smell of pine coming soft on the wind, and the women on the porch, quilts across their laps, Aunt Lucinda, Miss Belle, and whatever neighbor has a breath or two left at the end of the day for sitting.
and running our mouths.
That's when we listen to the
Grown folks talking.
Hope, Dell, and me sitting quiet on the stairs. We know one word from us will bring a hush upon the women. My grandmother's fingers suddenly pointing toward the house, her soft-spoken, I think it's time for you kids to go to bed now, ushering us into our room. So, we're silent.
Our backs against posts.
Posts in the back of stairs. Hope's elbows on his knees, head down. Now is when
We learn everything that there is to know about the people
down the road and in the day work houses, about the sisters at the Kingdom Hall, and the faraway relatives we rarely see.
Long after the stories are
Told I remember them, whisper them back
to Hope and Dell late
into
into
the night.
She's the one who left Nickeltown in the
Daytime, the one Grandmama says wasn't afraid of anything.
retelling each story, making up what I didn't understand or missed. When voices drop too low, I talk until my sisters and brothers' soft breaths tell me that they've fallen asleep. Then I let the stories live inside my head, again and again, until the real world fades back into cricket lullabies and my own dreams. Tobacco. Summer is over.
A kiss of chill in the southern air. We see the dim orange of my grandfather's cigarette as he makes his way down
On the darkening road, hear his evening greetings and the coughing that follows them. Not enough breath left now.
to sing, so I sing for him, in my head where only I can hear.
Where will the wedding supper be? way down yonder in a hollow tree. The old people used to say, a pinch of dirt in the mouth can tell tobacco's story. What crops are ready for picking, what needs to be left to grow, what soil is rich enough for planting, and the patches of land that need a year of rest. I do not yet know how sometimes the earth makes a promise it can never keep. Tobacco fields lay fallow, crops picked clean. My grandfather coughs again, and the earth waits for what and who it will get in return. How to listen number 3. Middle of the night, my grandfather is coughing me upright, startled. My mother leaving Greenville. It's late autumn now, the smell of wood burning, the pot-bellied stove like a warm, soft hand in the center of my grandparents' living room, its black pipe stretching into the ceiling, then disappearing. So many years have passed since we last saw our father, his absence like a bubble in my older brother's life that pops again and again into a whole lot of tiny bubbles of memory. You were just a baby, he says to me. You're so lucky. You don't remember the fighting or anything. It's like erasers came through her memory, my sister says. Erase, erase, erase. But now, my mother is leaving again. This I will remember. Halfway home, number 1. New York, my mother says. Soon I'll find us a place there. Come back and bring you all home. She wants a place of her own that's not the Nelsonville house, the Columbus house, or the Greenville house. Looking for her next place, our next place. Right now, my mother says, we're only halfway home. And I imagine her standing in the middle of a road, her arms out, fingers pointed north and south. I want to ask, will there always be a road? Will there always be a bus? Will we always have to choose between home and home? My mother looks back on Greenville. After our dinner and bath, after our powdered and pajamaed bodies are tucked 3 across into bed, after Winnie the Pooh and kisses on our foreheads and longer than usual hugs, my mother walks away from the house on Hall Street, out into the growing night, down a long, dusty road to where the Nickeltown bus takes her to the Greyhound station. Then more dust, then she's gone. New York ahead of her, her family behind. She moves to the back, her purse in her lap, the land pulling her gaze to the window once more, before darkness covers it, and for many hours there are only shadows and stars and tears and hope. The last fireflies. We know our days are counted here. Each evening we wait for the first light of the last fireflies, catch them in jars and let them go again, as though we understand their need for freedom. As though our silent prayers to stay in Greenville will be answered if we do what we know is right. Changes. Now the evenings are quiet with my mother gone, as though the night is listening to the way that we're counting the days. We know even the feel of our grandmother's brush being pulled gently through our hair will fast become a memory. Those Saturday evenings at the kitchen table, the smell of Dixie peach hair grease, the sizzle of the straightening comb, the hiss of the iron against damp, newly washed ribbons, all of this may happen again, but in another place. We sit on our grandparents' porch, shivering already against the coming winter. We talk softly about Greenville summer, how when we come back we'll do all the stuff we always did, hear the same stories and laugh at the same jokes, catch fireflies in the same mason jars, promise each other future summers that are as good as the past. But we know we're lying. Coming home will be different now. This place called Greenville, this neighborhood called Nickeltown, will change some. And so will each of us. Sterling High School, Greenville. While my mother is away in New York City, a fire sweeps through her old high school during a senior dance. Smoke filled the crowded room, and the music stopped, and the students' dancing stopped, and the DJ told them to quickly leave the building. The fire lasted all night.
And when it was over, my mother's high school had burned nearly to the ground. My mother said it was because the students had been marching.
And the marching made some white
People in Greenville mad. After the fire, the students weren't allowed to go to the all-white high school. Instead, they had to crowd in beside their younger sisters and brothers at the lower school.
In the photos from my mother's high school
Yearbook, The Torch, 1959, my mother is smiling beside her cousin Dorothy Ann, and on her other side, there is Jesse Jackson,
who maybe was already dreaming
of one day being the first brown man to run for president.
And not even the torching of their school could stop him or the marchers from changing the world. Faith. After my mother leaves, my grandmother pulls us
further into the religion she's always known. We become Jehovah's Witnesses like her. After my mother leaves, there's no one to say, the children can choose their own faith when they're old enough. In my house, my grandmother says, you'll do as I do.
After my mother leaves,
we wake in the middle of the night calling out for her. Have faith, my grandmother says, pulling us into the darkness. Let the Bible, my grandmother says, become your sword and shield.
But we do not know yet, who are we fighting? And what are we fighting for? The stories Cora tells. In the evening now, Cora and her sisters
come over to our porch. There are 3 of them, but 3 of us, but Hope moves away from the girls and sits by himself out in the yard. And even though my grandmother tells us not to play with them, she doesn't call us into the house anymore when she sees them walking down the road. Maybe her heart moves over a bit, making room for them.
A colorful mushroom
grows beneath the pine tree,
purple and gold and strange against the pine-needled ground. When I step on it,
Cora and her sisters scream at me. You just killed the devil while he was sleeping in his own house. Cora warns me the devil will soon be alive again, says he's going to come for you late in the night when you're sleeping and the God y'all pray to won't be there protecting you.
I cry as the sun sets, waiting. Cry until my mother comes out,
shoos Cora and her sisters home, holds me tight and tells me they're lying.
That's just some crazy southern superstition, my grandmother says. Those girls must be a little simple not knowing
a mushroom when they see one. Don't believe everything you hear, Jackie.
Someday you'll come to know that someone is telling the truth, and when they're just making up stories. Hall Street. In the early evening, just before the best light
for hide and seek takes over the sky, it's Bible study time. We watch from our places on the front porch, our cold hands cupped around hot chocolate, half gone and sweetest at the bottom, as the brother and sister from the Kingdom Hall make their way up the road.
Pretty Monday evening, the brother from the Kingdom Hall says.
Thank Jehovah, the sister from Kingdom Hall says back. We are silent. Brother Hope, Sister Dell, and me. None of us want to sit inside when the late autumn is calling to us and frogs are finally feeling brave enough to hop across our yard. We want anything but this. We want warm biscuits and tag and Jacks on the porch and our too long sweater sleeves getting in the way sometimes. But we are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Monday night is Bible study time. Somewhere else, my grandfather
is spending time with his brother Verdi. Maybe they're playing the harmonica and banjo, laughing and singing loud, doing what's fun to do on Pretty Monday evening.
Jehovah promises us
everlasting life in the new world, the brother from the Kingdom Hall says, and Brother Hope, Sister Dell, and me are silent, wanting only what's right outside, wanting only this world.
Soon. When the phone rings in my grandmother's
kitchen, we run from wherever we are, jumping from the front porch swing, climbing out of the mud-filled ditch out back, running quick from the picked clean garden. But my brother Hope is the fastest, picking up the phone, pressing it hard against his ear, as though my mother's voice, just that much closer, means my mother is closer to us.
We jump around him. Let me speak!
Until my grandmother comes through the screen door, puts down the basket of laundry, cold and dry from the line, takes the phone from my brother, shushes us, shoos us, promises us a moment with our mother soon.
How I learn the days of the week. Monday night is Bible study.
with brother and sister from the Kingdom Hall.
Tuesday night is Bible study
At the Kingdom Hall. Wednesday night is laundry night, the clothes blowing clean on the line above my grandfather's garden. And when no one is looking, we run through the sheets,
breathe in all the wonderful smells
of the air that adds to them.
Thursday night is ministry school.
One day we will grow up to preach God's word, take it out into the world, and maybe we'll save some people.
Friday night we're free as anything.
Hope and Dell's bikes skidding along Hall Street, but my knees bumping hard against the handlebars of my red three-wheeler. One more year maybe, Dell's bike will be mine.
Saturday we're up early. The watchtower and
awake, in our hands, we walk like sleepy soldiers through Nickeltown, ringing bells, knocking on doors, spreading the good news of something better coming. Sometimes the people listen, and sometimes they slam their doors or don't open them at all. Or look sadly down at me, ribboned and starched, my face clean and shining with oil, my words earnest as anything. Good morning, I'm Sister Jacqueline, and I'm here to bring you some good news today.
Sometimes they give me a dime, but won't
take my watchtower and awake.
Sunday it's watchtower study at
Kingdom Hall. 2 hours of sitting and sitting and sitting.
Then Monday comes, and the week starts all over again. Ribbons. They are pale blue
or pink or white. They are neatly ironed each Saturday night. Come Sunday morning, they're tied to the braids hanging down past our ears.
We wear ribbons every day except
Saturday, when we wash them by hand, Dell and I side by side at the kitchen sink, rubbing them with ivory soap, then rinsing them beneath cool water, each of us dreaming of the day our grandmother says, "You're too old for ribbons."
But it feels like that day will never come.
When we hang them on the line to dry, we hope they'll blow away in the night breeze, but they don't. Come morning, they're right there where we left them, gently moving in the cool air, eager to
anchor us to childhood. 2 gods, 2 worlds.
It's barely morning, and we're already awake, my grandmother in the kitchen ironing our Sunday clothes. I can hear Daddy coughing in his bed, a cough like he'll never catch his breath. The sound catches in my chest, and I'm pulling my dress over my head, hold my own breath until the coughing stops. Still, I hear him pad through the living room, hear the squeak of the front door,
and I know he's made
his way to the porch to smoke
a cigarette. My grandfather doesn't believe in
God, a God that won't let him smoke or have a cold beer on Friday night, a God that tells all the world is ending, so y'all walk through this world afraid as cats. Your God is not my God, he says. His cough moves through the air, back into our rooms where the light is almost blue, the white winter sun painting it.
I wish the coughing would stop. I wish he would put on Sunday clothes,
take my hand and walk with us down the road. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that everyone who doesn't follow God's word will be destroyed in the great battle called Armageddon.
And when the battle is done,
there will be a fresh new world, a nicer, more peaceful world.
But I want the world where my daddy
is, and don't know why anybody's God would make me have to choose.
What God knows. We pray for my grandfather,
and God to spare him, even though he's a non-believer. We ask that Jehovah look into his heart, see the goodness there.
But my grandfather says he doesn't need our
prayers. I work hard, he says. I treat people like I want to be treated. God sees this. God knows. At the end of the day, he lights a cigarette, unlaces his dusty brogans,
stretches his legs. God sees my good, he says. Do all the preaching and praying you want,
but don't need to do it for me.
New playmates. Beautiful brown dolls come from
New York City. Fancy stores my mother has walked into. She writes of elevators, train stations, buildings so high they hurt the neck to see.
She writes of places with beautiful names. Coney Island,
Harlem, Brownsville, Bear Mountain. She tells us she's seen the ocean, how the water keeps going long after the eyes can't see it anymore. Promises a whole other country on the other side. She tells us the toy stores are filled with dolls of every size and color. There's a barber shop and a hair salon everywhere you look. And a friend of Aunt Kay's saw Lena Horne just walking down the street. But only the dolls are real to us. Their black hair in stiff curls, down over their shoulders, their pink dresses made of crinoline and satin, their dark arms unbending. Still, we hug their hard plastic close and imagine they're calling us mama. Imagine they need us near. Imagine the letters from our own mother, coming to get you soon, are ones we're writing to them. We'll never leave you, we whisper. They stare back at us, blank-eyed and beautiful, silent and still. Down the road. Be careful when you play with him, my grandmother warns us about the boy with the hole in his heart. Don't make him run too fast or cry. When he taps on our back door, we come out, sit silently with him on the back stairs. He doesn't talk much, this boy with the hole in his heart, but when he does, it's to ask us about our mother in New York City. Is she afraid there? Did she ever meet a movie star? Do the buildings really go on and on? One day, he says, so soft, my brother, sister, and I lean in to hear, I'm gonna go to New York City. Then he looks off toward Cora's house down the road. That's south, my sister says. New York's the other way. God's promise. It is nearly Christmas time. On the radio, a man with a soft, deep voice is singing, telling us to have ourselves a merry little... Nickeltown windows are filled with Christmas trees. Coroner sisters brag about what they're getting, dolls and skates and swing sets. In the backyard, our own swing set is silent, a thin layer of snow covering it now. When we are made to stay inside on Sunday afternoons, coroner sisters descend upon it, taking the swings up high, stick their tongues out at us as we stare from behind our glassed-in screen door. Let them play, for heaven's sake, my grandmother says, when we complain about them tearing it apart. Your hearts are bigger than that. But our hearts aren't bigger than that. Our hearts are tiny and mad. If our hearts were hands, they'd hit. If our hearts were feet, they'd surely kick somebody. The other infinity. We are the chosen people, our grandmother tells us. Everything we do is a part of God's plan. Every breath you breathe is a gift God is giving you. Everything we own. Daddy gave us the swings, my sister tells her, not God. My grandmother's words come slowly, meaning this lesson is an important one. With the money he earned by working a job, God gave him a body strong enough to work with. Outside, our swing set is empty. Finally, coroner's sister is now gone. Hope, Dell, and I are silent. So much we don't yet understand. So much we don't yet believe. But we know this. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday are reserved for God's work. We are put here to do it, and we are expected to do it well. What is promised to us in return is eternity. It's the same, my sister says, or maybe even better than infinity. The empty swing set reminds us of this, that what is bad won't be bad forever, and what is good can sometimes last a long, long time. Even coroner sisters can only bother us for a little while before they get called home for supper. Sometimes no words are needed. Deep winter and the night air is cold. So still it feels like the world goes on forever in the darkness until you look up and the earth stops in a ceiling of stars. My head against my grandfather's arm, a blanket around us as we sit on the front porch swing. It's wine like a song. You don't need words on a night like this. Just the warmth of your grandfather's arm. Just the silent promise that the world as we know it will always be here. The letter. The letter comes on a Saturday morning. My sister opens it. My mother's handwriting is easy, my sister says. She doesn't write in script. She writes so we can understand her. And then she reads my mother's letter slowly while Hope and I sit at the kitchen table, cheese grits near gone, scrambled eggs leaving yellow dots in our bowls. My grandmother's beloved biscuits forgotten. She's coming for us, my sister says, and reads the part where my mother tells her the plan. We're really leaving Greenville, my sister says.
and Hope sits up straighter and smiles. But then the smile's gone. How can we have both places? How can we leave all that we've known?
Me on Daddy's lap in the early evening, listening to Hope and Dell tell stories about their lives at the small school a mile down the road? I'll be 5 one day, and the Nickeltown School's a mystery I'm just about to solve. What about the fireflies and ditches? What about the nights when we all climb into grandparents' bed and they move apart, making room for us in the middle?
Maybe that's when my sister reads the part that I don't hear. A baby is coming. Another one. A brother or sister. Still in her belly, but coming soon. She's coming to get us, my sister says again, looking around our big yellow kitchen, and then running her hand over the hardwood table as though she's already gone and trying to remember this. One morning, late winter. Then one morning, my grandfather is too sick to walk the half-mile to the bus that takes him to work. He stays in bed for the whole day, waking only to cough and cough. I walk slow around him, fluffing his pillows, pressing cool cloths over his forehead, telling him the stories that come to me again and again. This I can do. Find him another place to be when the world is choking him. Tell me a story, he says. And I do. New York baby. When my mother returns, I will no longer be her baby girl. I'm sitting on my grandmother's lap when she tells me this, already so tall my legs dangle far down, the tips of my toes touching the porch mat. My head rests on her shoulder now, where once it came only to her collarbone. She smells the way she always does, of pine sol and cotton, Dixie peach hair grease, and something warm and powdery. I want to know whose baby girl I'll be when my mother's new baby comes, born where the sidewalks sparkle, and me just a regular girl. I don't know how much I loved being everyone's baby girl until now, when my life as baby girl is nearly over. Leaving Greenville. My mother arrives in the middle of the night, and sleepily we pile into her arms and hold tight. Her kiss on the top of my head reminds me of all that I love, mostly her. It is late winter, but my grandmother keeps the window in our room silently open so that the fresh air can move over us as we sleep. 2 thick quilts and the 3 of us side by side. This is all we know now. Cold pine breezes and grandmother's quilts, the heat of the wood-burning stove, the sweet, slow voices of the people around us, red dust wafting, and then settling as though it said all that it needs to say. My mother tucks us back into our bed, whispering, "We have a home up north now." I'm too sleepy to tell her that Greenville is home, that even in the wintertime the crickets sing us to sleep. And tomorrow morning, you'll get to meet your new baby brother. But I'm already mostly asleep again, 2 arms wrapped tight around my mama's hand. Roman. His name is as strange as he is, this new baby brother, so pale and quiet and wide-eyed. He sucks his fist, taking in all of us without blinking. Another boy, Hope says. Now it's even Steven around here. But I don't like the new baby of the family. I want to send it back to wherever babies live before they get here. When I pinch him, the red marks stay behind. His cry is high and teeny, and the sound hurts my ears. That's what you get, my sister says. His crying is him fighting you back. And then she picks him up, holds him close, tells him softly everything's all right. Everything's always going to be all right, until Roman gets quiet, until his black eyes looking only at Dell, as if he believes her. The end of part 2.